So I'm joined with a friend of mine, AJ. How's it going?
Hey, how's it going, Mike?
Good. So today we're going to talk about
Rest in peace.
Rest in Peace, the explosive new album from Megadeth.
this year was the 30th anniversary of Megadeth's Rust in Peace, and AJ and I are going to go back to 1990. We're going to talk about where we were at that period of time in our lives, what we were listening to, what led us into that type of music, and we're going to dive a little bit into some of the behind the scenes on the making of the album, and we're going to go track by track and just kind of give an overview of our thoughts on these songs. Me and AJ, we've known each other for, gosh, I guess about 30 years.
Yeah.
That album is not only like a great album. I think that album is like a marker in that.
A snapshot in time.
But it's not just that album. There was like 1990 and 91 was like just like a phenomenal time for that type of music. I mean, that's when all those bands were really just
It's like the peak.
they were firing on all cylinders.
Yeah.
If you were to pick any band that would not make it, I think Megadeth would be that band.
Yes.
We both read,
Especially after reading the book.
yeah, we both just read. Dave Mustaine just published a memoir on the making of Rust in Peace. It's not like a narrative. It's like interviews from the people who were involved in the album. Only one missing, obviously, is Nick Menza, who has unfortunately passed away. And we've also both read Mustaine, which is the biography he published years ago. But I think also we should talk about how we're good friends with Dave Mustaine.
True. Yes.
Yeah,
We've met him on multiple occasions.
At least twice. Right. But we actually did hang out.
If we had just met him once, you can't really say
No,
that you're
but
good
twice.
friends. But twice.
And when he shares a William Shatner story, you know you're in with Dave Mustaine.
Yes.
So we were fortunate. It wasn't the Rust in Peace tour, but it was the Euthanasia tour.
No, Countdown, right?
No, it was Euthanasia because that's the CD I got signed.
Well, Countdown is when we first met him.
Oh, yeah. I'm talking about when we went backstage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
AJ's right.
Yeah.
Countdown, we hung out around back.
Right.
And Dave was sitting in his bus, and I made a
Not that we have a problem with being fanboys or anything, but
Oh my gosh, we'll go into some of that too about me. It's like, why didn't I have a girlfriend? Why won't girls talk to me? I can't understand. I don't know. I can't figure it out.
Yep.
So in the late '80s, before 1990, I was listening to the Beatles, but I think I was more into Pink Floyd. I was like way into Pink Floyd, and like The Wall. I remember, I think it was my freshman year of high school. I listened to The Wall like nonstop.
I guess Zeppelin, a lot of classic rock, just rock stuff.
I think that's everything on the radio. We basically
Yeah.
grew up on the radio.
Right. I hear all these stories from my friends now, like they grew up in a household where their parents listened to music or played music
My parents.
and exposed them.
Like ELO, Out of the Blue was an album my dad played all the time. I still think it's a great album. My dad had The Wall. He didn't listen to it that much, but he had bought it. These are LPs. Mm-hmm. And I would raid my parents' records.
But my dad and mom just were into the worst
Oh, really?
stuff. And they weren't really music people anyway. And if they were playing music, it was like Donna Summer or Air Supply or Captain and Tennille. And I'm not even saying those three as a joke. That's literally what was in my house. So my friends are the ones that got me more into rock and metal. Actually, when I was still in Florida, this would have been 83. I guess it was 83 because this is when this album was massive. But my first rock record experience was Pyromania.
Oh, yeah, that was mine.
And I had a
That was
dubbed
everybody's.
tape because I didn't have, anything but that. But someone had just recorded it for me, and I wore it out. I mean,
wore mine out, too.
absolutely. That record is just... And I think it's kind of interesting because that band and, the new wave British heavy metal influenced these bands heavily. Yeah. So
I think my big metal one was Iron Maiden. Yeah. I'm still a huge Iron Maiden fan. That was the band I grew up, as far as heavy metal, because I remember watching MTV, and they played Run to the Hills. And I wanted to get up and run around the room. And so I had a friend, it was like when Peace of Mind came out, he had the cassette. I remember on summer nights we would stay out and listen to his Ghetto Blaster. That's what we called him. And so I was listening to Maiden. I was heavy into Maiden. And in 1988, they released Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. And that's like when they peaked.
Which is kind of in that era.
It is. Metallica, Anthrax,
Injustice, yeah.
Slayer they were kind of underground. And I remember like walking around and seeing people like, I saw this one guy who had a Metallica Master Puppet shirt, and I mean he like wore it every other day. And I actually heard someone when I worked at Burger King, someone played Master Puppets, and I hated it. I thought it was terrible. But then,
yeah, you told me that story. I remember
the first thrash I ever heard, like that I liked, is someone loaned me the Among the Living cassette by Anthrax. I remember playing it, put it into my cassette player, and it starts off with that boom, 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 boom. It goes a little faster. It was dun, 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 dun. Then it goes dun, 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 dun. I was like jumping up and down in my room. I was like, oh my God, what is that? So I was listening to Anthrax. That was the first one I listened. I was in the Anthrax before I got into Metallica. Then one came out.
It has a dignity all its own.
And that was it.
yes.
Father, I need help. I'm in terrible trouble and I need help.
Don't you remember when you were little?
I was on a youth trip to Nashville, and a girl on that trip had the one cassette single, and she was playing it, and I'd heard this song, bits of it, and I was like, hey, can I borrow that? And I listened to it. I wore it out on the way down there and on the way back, but for some reason...
Was this a church trip?
It was, yeah. For some reason, that generated nothing in me to go, hey, when I get back or when I get any sort of money or get to a record store, I'm going to buy And Justice for All. For some reason, I just never, I don't know if I was just too scared of it or...
You were just satisfied with the song?
Well, I just loved it.
It
but
was
it did make me
scary.
want to discover it. And I think I was probably a little, like, I don't know if my parents will let me. I was a freshman.
Well, we both grew up, in religious homes. And you talk about Pyromania. Another one I had Pyromania, and I had Twisted Sister Stay Hungry.
Okay.
And my mom actually threw out my Stay Hungry cassette, even though she had bought it for me. And what's funny is if you listen to Stay Hungry, like song, because she's like, burn in hell. That song is like a warning against being bad or you'll burn in hell. So, anyway, parent, you don't argue because you're like a little kid and you're like, okay, I'm sorry.
I bought the one T-shirt, which is
With the
paratrooper hanging, the bloody stumps. And my mom said, no, I will not watch that. I will not deal with that. So
Are you serious?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
So a little off topic. But.
No, it's straight on topic. So anyway, okay, well, once I heard one, I got Injustice for All, and I remember I listened to it with headphones on. And then, of course, with the Metallica, and this is where I say, like, listen to Pink Floyd is, it's metal, but it's kind of progressive because exactly what you say, the time changes.
And the length of song.
Yeah. And it was like you could really dig deep into it. But also I liked, film scores. I really liked film scores, especially like John Williams and the scores to I had the score for the first Star Wars movie, and I loved it. And to me, that's what Metallica sounded like, was like symphonic.
Right.
But it was like, metal, it was guitars and everything. I remember I'd seen the Peace Sells album because it had like a great album cover with Vic at the UN. We used to watch Headbangers Ball because that was like the big thing to watch.
Yes.
And one night they played Megadeth, Peace Sells But Who's Buying? And I thought, first time I heard that song, I was like, oh my gosh, the song is awesome. But also, it's kind of a goofy video because it has that part where the dad walks into the bedroom and he's like, I want to watch the news. And the kid's like, this is the news. And like when you're a kid, like, yeah, this is important stuff.
What is this garbage you're watching? I want to watch the news.
Are you making headway at least?
This is the news.
But of course it's not. It's ridiculous. But So and then my friend Lee had, I think he had like So Far So Good or something. He's like, man, you should listen to Peace Sells, Megadeth. And I listened to it, and it's like, it's the same thing with Metallica. It's hard to wrap your brain around it because there's so much going on.
It takes time to digest. You definitely have to give it time.
Yeah, you have to like absorb. You have to listen to it a couple of times.
Yeah.
Okay, so then 1990 rolls around. A lot was happening.
You were a junior?
No, 1990 is when I graduated from high school.
That's right. I was a junior. I'm sorry.
And then it was the same. I graduated high school and I started college. So I was not a boy,
transitioning,
but not yet a man.
Right.
So then, what was it? Iron Maiden was releasing an album. Anthrax had an album coming out. I wasn't into Slayer, but I'm only bringing them up because they're significant. They had an album coming out, and Megadeth had an album coming out. And Rust in Peace was actually the first one to release an album, which was September 24th, 1990. But the one I was really excited for I was more excited for the Anthrax and the Maiden. Anthrax album came August 21st, and the Iron Maiden album came out October 1st. Slayer Season the Abyss came out October 9th. So this is all 1990. Metallica wouldn't release one until August 12th, 1991. I still think Persistent Time is a great album. I know you're not into Anthrax.
Yeah, I was going to confess that to the audience. For some reason, I have a blind spot with Anthrax.
But I loved Persistence of Time. So I was listening to that a lot. And then Iron Maiden released No Prayer for the Dying. And No Prayer for the Dying was really disappointing. Because Adrian Smith had left, so they brought Yannick Gers. And they decided, to go back to the roots. And anytime a band goes back to the roots, it's usually like...
yeah, it can be dangerous.
It's like, what are you doing? And the songs were shorter, and Bruce's singing was different. And I just remember I kept listening to that album, and I'm like, I don't think I love this album.
But it's Maiden.
Yeah, but I had to. I remember I had a couple friends in my truck with me one day, and I'm like, I don't think I like this album. And they're like, no, you were just, your expectations were really high, and all this. And I was like, okay, that must be it. So then I remember one night, it was Saturday night, because that's when Headbangers Ball was on. I was taking a shower, and I came out, and I remember Rust in Peace was like an album. I was like, oh, I'm going to get it eventually. I'm eventually going to get this album. Mm-hmm. And then Holy Wars video was on. I mean, I was just like, I remember just looking at the TV like, what? And then when Dave breaks into that.
Yeah.
I was like,
and I think that was my real gateway song. Like it just blew me away.
It did. And I tell you what, a friend of mine, after I heard that song, a friend of mine loaned me the cassette, Heath. And
thanks, Heath.
I wore that cassette out. I'm like, well, I got to buy this. Why am I not owning this? So I finally bought it.
This is something else that I just remembered. I can't remember exactly how this happened, but you were influencing me towards Megadeth, and then we had another friend, Clay.
Yeah.
Who was like, he would get on my case about, like, he liked Metallica okay, but he was like, dude, Megadeth is so much better. Like, you need to listen to Megadeth. And I'm like, and I was a naysayer. I mean, I admit it. And he, so I can't remember exactly. I have a stronger memory of you showing me, and I think it was Holy Wars, and it just blew me away. I mean, that song is just, it's amazing.
Even now, you listen to it.
It holds up.
But I remember just seeing him play, because when you see him play it, I mean, it's like he's just attacking that guitar. Mm-hmm. Like that guitar did something to him, and he's getting revenge on it.
I liked in the book they talked about making that video, and it was funny. Just them being straight out of rehab for the 700th time, and how Ellefson talked about they weren't in the best shape.
Oh, but
it was like 1,000 degrees in that warehouse.
They stretched him out.
Yeah. So they stretched the video he said it helped.
And that's a thing too with Megadeth, is like I mentioned this earlier. I mean, you had these bands that were really firing on all cylinders.
Yeah.
Like Anthrax had the same lineup that they'd had since their second album going into Persistence. Slayer had their same lineup since they started. Metallica, they lost Cliff Burton, but they had Jason Newsted. But then when you look at Megadeth, they were on with Rust in Peace, they were on their third lineup. But man, if you read that book, at the time they recorded Rust in Peace, my gosh, they were, like Dave Mustaine should be dead.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think both of us and fans of Megadeth would know that, yeah, they were struggling.
I had so much going for me before I got into trouble, and a lot of our fans stuck with us through the whole thing. You know, they knew what was wrong with me, they knew what was wrong with the band, and they stuck with us. And right now, that's the most important thing to me, is paying them back for their dedication and their loyalty.
But when you read the book and you see how many times they talk about
Relapsing?
Relapsing and back in rehab and out of rehab and back in and using and copying,
And then
it's crazy.
And the thing that really, as someone who has never been addicted to drugs, the system they had worked out. Like, well, we take heroin, but then we would take coke to make us not sleepy or something.
Well,
like
they would
that.
take coke and then they would have to come down. Like, hey, I've been up for 36 hours. I've got to sleep now, so let's get some heroin or a drink.
When the So Far So Good era ended, was it Donington? What was?
Yeah, Monsters of Rock. It's at Donington.
It was
right?
something. It
Castle
was Iron
Donington.
Maiden, Kiss, Van Halen. Man, they were a train wreck. Like Elfson couldn't score.
Yeah, he was really, really dope sick, and then he maybe finally scored right before they went on, and he was just blitzed. But
I don't think he scored. I think he was.
He ended up saying that he actually had a great show, but he was just toast.
He thought he didn't, but Beeler said he thought he did okay.
Yeah.
I think it was interesting. They said that when they toured with Maiden at that time, like Maiden kept them away from everybody.
Oh, okay.
Because Maiden toured with their families, and they didn't want Megadeth anywhere near their families. I mean, just that whole period before Rust in Peace was bleak. They fired Jeff Young and Chuck Beeler, and there's a story when Mustaine went to that panel, and they basically had to like carry him in and set him down, like he was just so.
Yes.
Like he was nodding off.
And there's another similar story with the was it the No More Mr. Nice Guy video?
Same
Just
thing.
a train wreck.
Yeah. And that was Penelope Spheres who had directed them in Decline of Western Civilization Part 2.
They're rich, they're famous, and with their faces on MTV and fans at their feet, young rock and roll stars sometimes feel all but invincible. But for some, stardom leads to seduction by the ultimate deadly high, heroin. Now the stars are fighting back against heroin in today's Inside Story.
One day I got arrested. I said, this is it. I had 9 chemicals in my body. I was on heroin, coke, crank, Valium, Starvocet, buprenorphine, chlorohydrates, alcohol, and pot. Something was wrong. I wasn't happy.
Dave Mustaine of the rock band Megadeth lived the musician's dream. He became a big rock star, made big money, and had access to big-time drugs like heroin.
I remember the day I woke up and found out I was a junkie. I figured, cool, I'm like Keith Richards, I'm an outlaw, and then reality came crashing in, and I realized that I had a serious problem.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing.
It was so bad that the record company, which is interesting, I guess it's a good thing that they really were invested in the band, but it was like the record company that was, setting it up for them to get clean.
Mm-hmm.
A number of record companies, including Sony Music, are stepping in to help artists and employees with drug problems.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting. They had all these people that were inserted into their lives to be their handlers, and they all served like purposes like in the band, but they were really functioning as like handlers for Dave and Dave.
But they would find ways to sneak off.
Yeah.
David Elfson, when Mustaine fell off, then he would be like, oh, well, Dave fell off, so I'll fall off too.
Right.
But it wasn't until Rust in Peace, I guess, when they were recording, that he was finally like, all right, this is it. I'm really...
Yes. That was his turning point, I think. And then I thought before that, building up when they were just writing songs for that record, in the book it talks about, correct me if I'm wrong, but Dave Mustaine like kind of issued a, hey, we're going to be clean.
That's
and if
right,
I catch anyone doing drugs. And I think Junior was a little fearful of that. And it kind of, he was definitely hiding his addictions. But at the same time, Mustaine was still using, it's comical.
Well, it was interesting because they talked about Rust in Peace was written while they were on drugs.
For sure.
And then they recorded it when they went clean.
Right.
Basically, it was Menza and Ellison that were recording most of the time.
Yeah.
And then they got Mike Klink.
Right.
And then he was with Guns N' Roses. And the rule with him was
If Guns calls.
if Axl calls, he has to stop recording.
Yeah.
They had just come off Appetite of Destruction, and they were going to record the Use Your Illusions. But
which worked, Nick worked well because to my knowledge, he never struggled with drugs.
no, his deal was pot, apparently.
Yeah.
And Chris Poland came in and did some demos, which Chris Poland recorded on Killing's My Business and Peace Sells. And he's actually a phenomenal guitarist. Like, Peace Sells is a great album.
Mm-hmm.
So he did the demos, but I guess it's just, I guess Chris Poland is just not destined to ever, because he actually did record on System Has Failed.
Yes.
But anyway, I guess it was just not in the cards for him to be in the band. But so they got Marty Friedman. It was interesting because the day Marty Friedman auditioned, he had after the Megadeth audition, he was supposed to audition with Madonna.
Yep.
And after he did the audition with Megadeth, he didn't even bother going to see him.
I thought another funny thing with Marty coming in that when they talked about his audition was Dave running outside and calling management and saying, okay, love him. I want him in the band. He's got to change his name. That's the worst rock name ever. And the management was like, well, he's not changing his name because he has a career. He's like a session guy. He has a record out. So that's not happening. And Dave is immediately like, okay, we can work with the Dave.
Yeah.
And now, having successfully passed the audition,
Brand new one.
we are ready to institute the new Megadeth lineup.
They kind of had to image clean him up, but he was just
Didn't he have like
phenomenal.
pink hair or something?
Yeah, different color hair.
ridiculous.
But I thought it was interesting, too, how Dave talked about previous guitarists that he'd worked with. They were phenomenal at one thing, like solos or great rhythm players. But he said Marty had it all. He could do
They
everything.
actually tried to get Slash to join.
Right. That was very interesting.
And I didn't know that they were friends with Slash.
I didn't either.
And
That whole time period when they were writing the record.
they were hanging out with him a lot. But the thing about Marty is he was so good, it caused Mustaine to relapse.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, because
He
it
felt
really
really-
challenged him, and
He was like, how good would I be if I didn't do drugs? I'm not where I'm supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike Klink said that at the beginning, he never saw Mustaine there. And if he did see him,
that blew me away.
He was like in this area sitting on the couch or something
Yeah.
like that. Mike Klink didn't really realize the dynamic of the band, but because he worked primarily with Nick and David.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they brought Marty in, he worked
To
with
me,
him.
it sounded like Dave Jr.
Yeah.
really saved what happened in that studio recording because he knows Mustaine so well. I think this is what I kind of read into it.
Yeah, he knew what to do.
He knew what to do. Yeah, and it really, I think Dave Mustaine could trust him to be away a little bit, so it kind of worked out. But as you read it, you're still shocked that.
Well, in fact, he said he was shocked when he didn't get a producer credit on the
that's
album.
right. Yes, that's
he
right.
said it was Mustaine and Mike Klink, and he's like, "Why does Dave have?" But they said that when Dave finally showed up to record, that he was just destroying it. Like he was just so
machine
good.
It's funny, not funny, but interesting side story. A local record producer, I guess, engineer here in town, has had a chance to work with Dave Mustaine because he's actually recorded a lot in recent years in Nashville. So he's kind of been in this area a little bit.
Is it Dave Jordan?
No, it's Travis Wyrick.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, and Travis is a really, really good guitar player in his own right. But he just has told me stories about Mustaine. Like he is just a machine. He's phenomenal. And
Yeah, and
not that we didn't know that, but it's interesting hearing that.
Well, and that's the thing about Megadeth. Even when you listen to them, their songs are of all the bands, their albums are always the shortest.
Mm-hmm.
But it felt like it had the most in
Content,
it. And he's like when he was in his prime, he was a great lyricist.
Yeah.
He wrote really like the lyrics to "Set the World on Fire." Man, it's like my favorite lyrics because I can just visualize what he's talking about.
Right.
Talking about that nuclear holocaust.
And that record, I know we're getting off a little bit, but that record kind of, I guess it's one of the more unliked but
I've never understood that.
I
'cause
know. I
think it's
love that
good.
record. Yeah.
I think it's solid all the way through.
So
but
far,
but
so good.
they've made the comment they made it for money, basically.
Oh.
But I think they say stuff like that when they're.
In hindsight.
But anyway, so that goes like with Rust in Peace. The lyrics on that whole album are just. I mean, it's.
One of my favorite parts of the book was him going song by song and talking about that, because a lot of times, I just watch a lot of rockumentaries, so to speak, but they're, singers, lyricists are very hesitant to explain songs. They want it to be open to the listener.
Right.
Which I understand that, but I loved that. I loved hearing like, well, this is what I was going through. I saw this or I experienced this, and that's what I wrote it about. I love that.
Right, and also another thing is the way he got the title of the album. They were coming back from some trip, and they pulled up behind a car, and it said, "May all your warheads rust in peace."
Right.
And he was like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
I'll tell you another thing that I thought was interesting about learning about the recording is it wasn't all one take. They pieced the performances together.
Yeah.
And he did it on tape. That's another thing, too. This was before digital, so Mike Klink cut all this on tape, which to me is like sorcery.
Yeah, and I think Ellison talked about how he was shocked how good it turned out with him editing it like that.
Yeah, they record it, and he said, "Okay, you guys leave."
Yeah.
And he had all this tape on the wall. And he spliced the album, like a cymbal crash here and all. I mean, it's like... And
I think there was a real art to that back then. I mean, it's
if I hadn't heard them live, I would have been disappointed by that. But, I mean, they can obviously pull it off live.
As I got more into Megadeth, I mean, I was an absolute Metallica, just
zealot,
idiotic fanboy.
Yeah.
But one thing, just me playing music a little bit, more recently in my life, anytime I saw Megadeth, they were phenomenal live. And I think it's the drumming and the riffs being played live. They were just a machine compared to, Metallica's great to see live. I mean, Hetfield is a great frontman, but I always thought Lars was a little sloppy live, and I just never got that with Megadeth. They were just, what you heard on the record is what you got.
Yeah, so that's why when you talk about each song is not a single performance that they played live all the way through, it's been spliced together.
Yeah, they definitely weren't working in the same room together much.
No. But then
Ellison and Nick.
Well, they did the
seemed
old
to do a
school.
lot.
They did drums first.
Right.
Then David did bass.
Yeah.
And then Marty came in and did guitars.
Yeah.
And then Dave came in and he recorded. And so anyway, they recorded the album with Mike Klink, but Mike Klink had to leave because Axl called. And they brought in some producer who had worked with Jane's Addiction. He lasted like 1 hour.
Yeah, aren't there mixes of his
No,
recording?
I think
Okay.
that's no, because he was only with them for I don't even think he was with them a day. Dave made the comment because the guy's name was Dave.
Okay.
And after he worked with him, Dave said, "We have too many Daves here." Ed Ripka did that phenomenal. I love that album cover. There's something about it. There's something about it all being blue. It just stands out.
Yes. I didn't know. You may know this, but I was reading about this today that the cover is, of course, you can see Gorbachev and Bush, but the other three leaders, it's like the Prime Minister of France, Germany, and China. I think.
I figured it was probably China.
So they were actually people, and I didn't know that. Just being a kid, seeing that record, I knew the big two, but didn't know the others.
I think everyone, that's Gorbachev.
Yeah,
That's our president.
He's got the island on his head.
But and I was always trying to figure out the relevance of the album cover. And of course, the album cover doesn't have anything to do with the song "Rust in Peace." It's more of a Hangar 18.
Yeah, it's a Hangar 18 thing.
But still, it's awesome. Then something else happened.
Tell us.
In August 2nd of 1990, Operation Desert Storm started.
Let's face it, we're greedy. We want their oil.
Some may ask, why act now?
There was no reasoning with a man like Hussein.
Kuwait was an oil well that they turned into a country.
Why not wait?
How are we supposed to react to what Saddam Hussein has done?
We cannot let it happen.
The world could wait no longer.
U.S. forces based in Saudi Arabia have launched an attack on the nation of Iraq.
I mean, if you an album that kind of became a soundtrack for the time.
Right.
I mean,
That's a great point.
I remember hearing stories about the pilots were listening to Slayer while they were doing their bombing runs. Yeah, I mean, it's like the song Holy Wars, Take No Prisoners, and the song Rust in Peace, and even to an extent like Dawn Patrol. It was like the soundtrack to the war.
Yeah.
You know, it was the airstrike, and I remember everyone was saying, well, once the ground war starts, that's when the bloodshed's going to start. Because these people, they've been fighting for generations, and it's going to be bad. It's going to be really bad.
I remember my dad telling me that if you don't get better grades and we are at war, you're going to get drafted. So that was
Really?
that was good. That
Oh, wow.
little motivation.
And it was like every day you'd get up, did the ground war start? Did the ground war start?
Right.
And I remember that morning I woke up, and it was just lines and lines of Iraqis with their arms up. And you're like, whoa. They had just all surrendered.
Yep.
It was like insane.
Throughout this 4-day ground campaign, coalition forces had encountered only modest Iraqi resistance. This fact goes a long way to explaining the unbelievably low casualty rate that the coalition suffered in the conflict, with a total of just 170 battle casualties. In fact, the Iraqis, despite their significant forces and modern equipment, performed unimpressively during the conflict, as evidenced by the capture of 48,000 Iraqi soldiers in just 100 hours of battle.
It just fit. It just fit that time. And I don't know if that helped the album. And even Mustaine said recently, I saw him in an interview where he said, like, you know, the Gulf War, at the time the Gulf War, heavy metal was huge.
I remember during the Gulf War, metal was huge.
And it was. And Clash of the Titans was a big tour.
Two package tours that did survive on the road were the Scorpions' Great White Trickster Triple Bill and the mighty Clash of the Titans.
And was interesting because it was the big three, was Anthrax, Megadeth, and Slayer, and they actually alternated their order.
Who headlined?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every night that the Titans clash, the audience is posed with a bit of a mystery. The order of the appearance for the bands changes each night and is never announced.
A lot of people have asked us, you know, hey man, you closing, you opening, and you know, I mean, we've been kind of vague about it, but we say we definitely don't open.
Alice in Chains always opens the show, but for Anthrax, Megadeth, and Slayer, you find out when the music starts. You might think each band wants to go on last, but that's not what they're saying.
The middle is the best spot, actually, the middle. Definitely the middle. The anxiety is so overwhelming, it drives me nuts. I mean, I'm like a caged tiger ready to go on stage and have to sit there and pace and listen to almost 3 hours of music before you even go on.
And it was interesting that in the book, they always, Ellison and Mustaine both say that their big competitors were Slayer. I saw them on the Rust in Peace tour. I saw them here in Knoxville at the Bijou Theater. It was like a little small-ish venue. And I think it was
I'm
like...
so jealous.
It was such a good show. It was so hot, man. It was hot in there. And they sounded great. I remember the funny thing is this band named Anacrusis opened for them. And like their whole set, everyone was sitting. Except for this one guy was standing in the middle, like in the middle of the theater. And he was like, had his hands on his head, and he was banging his head.
Feeling it.
And it was just him by himself. I'm like, man, I'll tell you what, he's loyal.
Yep. There's always that guy.
But I heard later that Mustaine was sitting at the bus signing autographs, and we missed that. But anyway.
You got redemption, though.
Yeah.
On that.
We, and then after that album, you know, and that's another thing. Dave Mustaine was on MTV like all the time.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's the only reason I have.
I didn't expect to see Dave Mustaine in a tie.
Yeah.
He looks good.
Is that a clip-on?
No, it's real. He's tapped up.
You dyed it yourself?
Yeah, I did.
He became like their darling boy.
He was like the political kind of...
They sent him to the Democratic Convention.
Hi, this is Dave Mustaine from Megadeth, your MTV News correspondent here for the evening outside of the Madison Square Garden. I'll be your host for tonight outside of the Democratic National Convention.
Every time they did something, MTV like followed them. Like when they were recording Countdown to Extinction.
Well, what do you think about when you think about MTV News?
MTV News. You hear it first.
Oh yeah, the P-Cells.
P-Cells intro, yeah.
they used that for years. It's like everyone invested in them. Like the record company invested in them. MTV like really invested in Megadeth.
Yeah.
They gave...
And they talk about that a little bit in the book, how this record just felt like that it had the backing. So it went on, they did a press tour in Europe, and it just felt like, I think they talk about how their resources were so much, but they had people working with them. And
Yeah. They had good people.
Fresh from conquering all on the recent Clash of the Titans tour, Megadeth's Dave Mustaine and Dave Ellefson talk about the band's new lineup, their time with Guns N' Roses producer Mike Klink, and their new album, Rust in Peace.
I think something that really kind of like shows you that Rust in Peace, what it was, what it became, is when The Onion did that article where bands continue to record albums as if Rust in Peace hadn't been made.
That's so great.
It's like this universal, like, oh well, it's not Rust in Peace, but we're gonna try to make something.
Yeah,
it just shows you just
the impact that it had.
I mean, I still like those albums, like Persistence Time, the Black Album. I like Seasons in the Abyss. You know, I like all those albums from Faith No More put out a couple of really good albums that time period. But Rust in Peace is just, it's Rust in Peace. It's just special. I think it was 2004. He released the remix albums. Apparently, a bunch of the vocal tracks got lost.
Something definitely happened, because as when I first heard that, it really shocked me. Yeah, and I didn't know that he'd lost that. So I just thought, well, why would he re-record? Because it was great before.
I think Holy Wars is the same. When I listen to Holy Wars, it
Right.
sounds exactly the same.
Right.
But like if you listen to like Take No Prisoners. Five Magics.
Yeah.
I mean, those are definitely. Poison Was a Cure is definitely one.
I A/B'd it a lot today, mostly music, and to me the remixes and remasters, it sounds a little more compressed, a little more bright. It's not offensive. I'm not like a purist, where I'm sure some people are, but.
And when the reissues were released, David Ellefson wasn't a part of the band at that time. And I believe I read an interview where he said that he wasn't really happy with the way they sounded.
But he came back, when he came back to the band, it was for that anniversary tour, the 20th anniversary of Rust in Peace.
And it was apparently Dave's son who instigated it.
Okay.
Apparently his son has
has a lot of influence.
Yeah. Which is interesting, because I remember when he announced on Headbangers Ball that him and his wife were expecting.
My wife and I are expecting a kid, so...
You ready to be a dad?
No, but it's going to be nice to have a gardener in a few years.
That's the way you're looking at it, right?
Yeah, well, you know how it is.
They tried to get Nick and Marty back, but apparently...
Marty wanted too much money, and probably Nick too.
Well, Nick was just not playing as strong.
That's right. Yeah.
But he did want to sell like merchandise, and the same thing with Marty.
Right. Marty wanted to fly first class everywhere and just be paid. Well, and I think Mustaine offered to pay him equal money to what he was making.
But he also wanted to have what his people would be making too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So.
And it's a shame that Rust in Peace lineup didn't reunite, because it was like for 4 albums you had that lineup.
Yeah.
And then when Menza left, it actually started to feel like, oh, I think this is coming to a close.
Right. Yeah. I don't know if you remember this, when we saw them in Bristol, I don't know if he was newly married. He was newly married. No,
they got married after they recorded Rust in Peace.
Right. So, but he made some comment about having a wedding band and like, hey, I'm married now, so I don't have to try to get laid every night. I remember him making that comment, and I just thought it was odd. Like
when we saw him.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
Now I guess I should tell this. When I met my friend Brian, if he's still listening, he'll get a kick out of this. So this was during the Countdown to Extinction tour, and we were standing outside in freezing cold, and they let us.
Most of us had socks on.
Yeah, one of us did not, and I swear to you, his feet were blue. I'm not joking. So we were standing in line to meet Dave Mustaine, and I go up, and I'm a little excited, to say the least. Let me just go back to, I mentioned this, and I got to follow up on this. When I was in college, I had Megadeth shirts and a Megadeth hat that I wore all the time.
Yes.
I was super winter.
I had many.
I mean, I had the hat too. I thought I looked pretty cool.
You did, I thought.
Well, yeah, but you weren't. what I was interested in. But anyway, so I'm standing, and I was always trying to track down their singles and stuff like that. And this was before the internet, and I found this place in North Carolina that sold imports, and I used to call them like every other week. Got anything new?
And remember bootlegs, like $50 awful
Which are
live
the
recording
worst,
bootlegs.
I can't believe. Unless Marty Friedman tells you which ones to get.
Yeah, that's right.
When we met him, he was telling me which Megadeth bootlegs to get. But anyway, so we're standing in line to meet Dave Mustaine, and what was it I said? I said, "Oh man, I'm such a big fan," or something like that. And I said, "I got 1 million of your CDs." And Dave goes, "1 million, huh?" And I'm like, "Yeah."
And you weren't like 12 years old.
No,
you were an
was,
adult human man.
This was 92, so I was 20 or 21, acting like a giddy schoolgirl. Yeah.
If we do a future episode, I'll tell an embarrassing story about me talking to Nick Menza.
I know what you're talking about. Hey, maybe we'll have a euthanasia anniversary podcast.
Countdown euthanasia.
Because that's when we actually got to hang out with the band.
Yeah.
So that's a story for another time.
Backstage, man.
Oh, well, let's go through the songs. There's not a dud in the batch.
It's all killer, no filler.
No. The song opens up with Holy Wars, which has that great like.
Just that could have been the record.
I mean, really could have, and it just explodes into that.
And I liked too in the book where he talks about the kind of the idea for Holy Wars.
Yeah.
And I think it was it Ireland?
It was Ireland, and the Protestants and the Catholics.
That and there had been a story I heard, that's I think most people know is where he said something from the stage and it didn't.
Yeah, he said what happened was there was somebody selling illegal bootleg T-shirts.
Yes,
and he said, "Why is this guy? I want you to confiscate those shirts." And the guy apparently said, "But it's for the cause." And he's like, "What cause?"
Mm-hmm.
And this is where Dave was running his mouth before he knows what he's talking about. So while they were performing their set, he goes, "And this one's for the cause." And they said the audience just split in two. Like it went, it was like the Protestants on one side and the Catholics on the other.
Yeah.
And they had to leave in an armored bus or something like that.
But that was the genesis of his idea for that song. But see, that song is so cool because it starts one way and then it goes in that other direction of kind of like first person with him and his wife and his baby. It's almost like two stories.
Well, it is two stories, yeah, because the first one's the Holy Wars and the second one's based on the Punisher.
Right, that's true.
Even though he said it was inspired by what happened in Ireland, it definitely feels more Middle Eastern.
Mm-hmm.
And even Marty's little break there. It sounds like
it's very Arabic.
Yeah. Which apparently he re-recorded after begging them.
Yes, that was interesting.
He did.
He felt like they were telling him that he was good, he was okay, but he felt like I just need to do that again, and he was very happy that he did.
Yeah, he pestered him into oblivion apparently. And then I think the thing about that song though is definitely, I mean, it's just that the middle part where he just like that.
Yeah, the bridge is just.
I mean,
and it goes from that and it just builds and builds and it goes into that solo. That I'm pretty sure Mustaine plays that solo.
Yeah,
it's just so.
I mean, it's like. But then, a song I really like is Hangar 18. I think Hangar 18 is really great.
I thought interesting about that song is that it's the chords of Call of Cthulhu.
Oh, that's
and
right.
Dave wrote that song in Metallica, but he took those chords. That chord arrangement is very interesting. I read something about it today. It's some sort of music theory Lydian chord, but
it's very informative. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know music. But he
there you have it, folks. It's
obviously-
some sort of music theory.
some sort of But he obviously changed it and sped it up. But it's his music anyway. So
I remember reading that and I forgot. But I think the thing about Hangar 18 is it's a song, but then it's just a jam.
Yeah.
And
it's kind of like dueling solos.
Yeah. It's like, and the video. I love that video.
Oh yeah,
the video is.
It's funny they were talking about the contacts.
Yeah. David couldn't. His eyes were closed.
Yeah, two. Yeah, that's right. Two were and two weren't.
Yeah,
because they alternated the.
But and they were on that platform where Dave Mustaine was like 100 feet up.
Yeah,
and he was like, could have like toppled over, and that would have been the end. But he also what's cool about that video is they do some cool miniature work.
Right.
In that video, and it's cool too because you can see Vic, and you could tell they put some money into that video. And then it breaks into Take No Prisoner, which that opening with the drums, I mean, it just, you just sound like, it's like an assault. Like, just like, like an army rapidly approaching. He said he was inspired by Born on the 4th of July.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And, could take his life, won't take his hair. By the way, son, here's your wheelchair. And then, the change on the Kennedy speech. And then, that's the bad word.
Yeah.
In it, where they say the S word.
That's a bad word in it.
That's where the remix really sounds different.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it sounds completely.
It does.
And then we go into Five Magics, which that's a really great song.
It's great. Right. It was a book he read. In the book, Dave talks. I thought it was really good. He talks about the call and answer portion of the lyrics in this, and how the last line that he who lives in sin will surely live the lie, and then there's no answer. Thought that was interesting how he talked about how
like he the villain.
Right. Yeah, it kind of leaves it up to the listener.
That's another one with a remix that sounds really weird. Those lyrics.
It does. Yeah.
But I love that whole and that's the thing that Mustaine's always done. That's I think is really cool. And was it that song where he was trying to figure out what effect to use for the second part?
Right.
And he ended up just cupping his hands over the mic to get that.
Yeah.
But he's really good at distorting his voice. Then that's the conclusion of the first side, right?
I don't know sides.
Yeah, Five Magics. Well, cassettes, because you'd flip the cassette over, unless you had a fancy cassette player, which would automatically.
By the time I got into this, I wasn't slumming it anymore. I was all about CDs.
And then Poison Was the Cure. Which is like a super short song. That was another thing too. Mike Klink was always trying to get them to record another song.
Mm-hmm.
Because the album is only 40 minutes, which is really, really short. Because, the other bands were doing
But they were pushing the limits.
They were pushing it to an hour. But Poison Was the Cure is a great one where he said in the book he thought he was writing about a female, but in retrospect, he thinks he was talking about heroin.
Yeah, that's another one that's a little bit dual meaning. It was the girl that he thought he was going to marry.
Diana,
right?
who's mentioned in Wake Up Dead.
Yeah,
and Poison Was the Cure. That's another one I've always really liked the lyrics.
It kind of starts out with it's like a speed metal blues song a bit, just musically.
And then Lucretia.
Oh, it's a great song. Should have been a single, in my opinion.
Which has that great little cackle at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then that's another one of those that has really great lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
It just really, you can visualize what he's talking about, like, going up into an attic. Which was based on a place that he lived.
Well, and he would go up there and write.
And read.
Just kind of get away, yeah.
And hiding from everyone. My friends all say, Dave, you're mental anyway. Hey.
Well, that one, it sounded like it generated a lot of fan interest in like who was Lucretia.
Oh,
Was
that's
it
right.
Was it a family member? Or was it?
And someone actually theorized who it was, and he was like, "Okay, whatever."
Yeah.
So then we go.
Oh my gosh!
Tornado.
Listeners are not ready for Tornado of Souls.
Oh my goodness!
Which I say has the best Megadeth solo of their entire career. Marty was playing no games.
No, I mean I remember like driving and listening to that, and it's like, you know how you at different times you latch on to different parts of the song. I can remember when I latched onto that solo, and I was like, it was just like, dang.
And I'm kind of like, this is just me, but like I know a solo is really good if it really catches my, because I'm not as much a solo guy. Like I really love riffs and rhythm, and riffing is impressive to me. And solos have to be just amazing to really like get me. And there's just such a great hook in that. Well, in a lot of Megadeth solos, and especially on this record, but man, Tornado of Souls.
And that's where you really see the difference between Dave and Marty, because, you know, Dave used to say he plays with hate and Marty plays with love.
Yeah.
And it's true. Like Marty's much more intricate.
More, melodic, like more flowing, and Dave's is aggression and just
staccato,
yeah.
you know, just that rapid fire. But he has a lot of feeling in it.
Sure.
You know, because that's like if you listen to a lot of bands from the 80s, you know, the lead guitars were almost always like that, you know, just like just playing fast for the sake of playing fast. And then, you know, Mustaine and Friedman, there was like art to it. You know, there was
it's thoughtful.
It was like its own piece.
Right.
You know, you could extract it.
Yep.
And just, you know, listen to that. Okay, so then we go to
Dawn Patrol.
Oh gosh. What a great lead-in to Rust in Peace. And that's another case where Mustaine is like distorting his vocals.
Right.
You know that. You know.
We end our life in smokes in the dark of the Dawn Patrol.
He's almost putting like a British.
Yeah, he did.
Bit of a Brit.
He did the Madonna British voice.
I know. I bet you'd like to meet Madonna, huh? What was that?
He said Madonna's an old anorexic whore who wore her to welcome years ago, and that now she suddenly speaks with a British accent and she thinks she can play guitar and she should go f*** herself.
Should I come in now?
Not quite yet.
When I saw them live, they played that song.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
But I don't think they played Rust in Peace, which was weird. Because I remember like, oh, Rust in Peace is next. And they didn't play it. Okay. Well, that's kind of weird. But it was just Dave Elfson and Nick Menza, like Marty and Mustaine went off stage while they played it. But yeah, Dawn Patrol. I mean, that makes me think of like Mad Max.
Another thing interesting on Dawn Patrol, that it was written on the So Far So Good So What kind of tour era into that.
Yeah.
And that
Mustaine didn't want to use it.
No, Ellison borrowed an 8-string bass from a friend in Dio, actually the bass player for Dio that he'd become friends with, and then just wrote that immediately when he got that. It kind of inspired him, and he had it stashed. And like you said, Mustaine didn't care for it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but in the book, I think it talks about him and Menza really like kind of pounding that out, and presenting it back to Dave, and he was like pretty impressed with it.
And yeah, there's also a hint that maybe he did it. He said he did it to appease Dave Elfson,
right?
But then he was like, "Oh, wait a minute, this is actually
good,
good." And it's like a great lead-in for the song "Rust in Peace" because, I mean, what a way to end that album.
I remember you telling me this, and that Megadeth had for an era there, they had really good closing track songs like "Ashes in Your Mouth."
Oh,
it was
yeah,
great, and it was kind of
Devil's Island.
Yeah, and so "Rust in Peace" it was great. Just a great ending.
I love the way I love that drum intro. And then, that. And then when Dave sings those lyrics, it sounds like he hates those words and he's trying to destroy them with his voice.
Yeah, that's true.
Because they're just such great lyrics, you can.
Well, he almost does that voice thing too, where he changes his voice.
Yeah, he goes back and
it's
forth.
A little different. Yeah,
he goes to he goes into that grovelly, deep voice. High priest of Holocaust, fire from the sea.
Yeah,
and then he goes into Dave voice.
Right.
And when you listen to that song, those lyrics are you can just picture oh well, this is what life will be like in a nuclear holocaust.
Right.
I have never been this far before. What lies ahead is unknown to me.
And battle their way past his death traps.
They are in the vault of beasts. They have no chance of survival.
Yeah.
It's like Set the World Afire.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, has that great, where it fades out and then it comes back in, it's just, what a closer. And, the album just goes straight through.
Like you said, there's really no weak track.
No, there's not.
I never bump a track.
I like the fact that Poison is a Cure is only 3 minutes long, or that Lucretia is only 4 minutes long. It feels like it should be longer than that.
Yeah.
It's like they just put what needs to be in the song and then they just get out.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Holy Wars is essentially 2 songs, which is 636, which is, Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner from Megadeth. With the remaster, they released a song called My Creation, which was actually written by Nick Menza.
I did not know that.
It's alive!
Yeah, and it didn't make the album. I like the song.
Yeah.
It's only 1:36.
Mm-hmm.
Now, does it fit? It's like you listen to it now and you're like, that's the problem. Like when they do remasters and they add bonus tracks, it's cool that they added bonus tracks.
Well, it's almost unfair because you don't know if it would fit. Because if you'd have heard it in there originally in that time,
yeah. Because Rest in Peace,
it might just feel like, oh, that fits.
Rest in Peace is the last song on Rest in Peace.
Yeah,
it just is.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's Rest in Peace.
All you young kids, if you've not gone down the Rest in Peace,
you gotta listen to it. Remember, other bands are futilely trying to make albums.
Yeah,
even though Rest in Peace exists. Like I said, it goes back to a period in our lives. And, without sounding, well, this is going to sound totally cheesy, but it really was, we were leaving our youth.
Yeah.
Becoming adults.
Yep.
There was a war starting, for a long time. For a few years, that really was a major component of our lives, trying to track down music, CD singles.
And it kind of, for me, it felt like, when you're in it, you just think it's always going to be like that.
Yeah, it does.
And then you realize that it was really a classic time for that kind of music. And so,
and
special time.
It's when AJ and I became really good friends.
BFFs.
You look back on that, and it was silly, and probably wasn't always the best investment money-wise.
Right.
So, yeah. And also, it was a time when before, you bought your CDs, that was the only place you could get them. You couldn't download them. Concert tickets were
hard
still...
media.
Concert tickets were like $20. It
was a good time.
Yeah.
It was a great time for us because...
I think Metallica was like 30, which was like, holy crap, that's expensive.
But we were finally getting to that point where we could just drive where we wanted.
We had cars.
They're playing in Charlotte. Okay, we'll go there or wherever it is.
We'll request the day off.
Yeah.
And we'll drive up there.
We buy our tickets at Cat's Music.
Yes, that's true. And we also went to this place called Disc Exchange.
That's
where we hung out.
Lots and lots of money.
Yeah, that's where we hung out.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't go to, like, parties or stuff.
Right.
We'd be like, hey, you want to go to
Which, like,
This exchange? Yeah, sure,
it's
let's
funny
go.
because the people that made the music that we loved would just laugh at our sad lives. Like, we were not these cool, air quotes, cool partying people. It was just metal nerddom.
Anyway, it's kind of cool looking back.
Stroll down metal memory lane.
Metal memory lane.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you for joining me.
Yep.
Thank you for listening. All right, that's it. We're out. Peace out. You've been great. We've not been Megadeth.